talked at length about how I just don't understand today's wrestling fanboys. Why do they keep pushing for this weird wrestling product? Why do they keep telling Tony Khan to sign these 90-pound jobbers with no mic skills? Why is it that they seem to want their heavyweights to be as small as possible? Why do they think that Tessa Blanchard beating Brian Cage is completely believable and they're cheering it on? I mean, what is the thinking behind them supporting this absurdist wrestling product? But recently, I think I finally got a clue as to how they think. I was watching this random fanboy defend today's wrestling product by referencing Lara Croft and Mortal Kombat, and it dawned on me. Oh my goodness. They are using video game sensibilities for wrestling. Because when you use video game sensibilities for wrestling, there's nothing wrong with Tessa Blanchard beating Brian Cage. There's nothing wrong with Marco Stunt beating Brock Lesnar. There's nothing wrong with Sasha Banks beating Bobby Lashley. Because after all, in Super Mario 64, Bowser is 10 times the size of Mario, and Mario picks up Bowser and throws him in the air. So why can't Tessa Blanchard pick up Brian Cage and throw him in the air? It's the same thing. And Chun-Li can beat up Zangief, so why can't Sasha Banks beat up Bobby Lashley? It's completely believable. They're using video game sensibilities for wrestling, which in my opinion disconnects them from mainstream fans who have sensibilities more grounded in reality, where Marco Stunt would get destroyed by Brock Lesnar in 2 seconds. Marco Stunt should never be in a 50-50 match with Brock Lesnar because there's no way the mainstream audience is going to buy into that. The mainstream audience does not see wrestling as a video game. They see it as a scripted combat sports presentation. As the mainstream audience, we love the colorful characters. We love the outrageous promos and storylines, but you can only take it so far. You can't have Matt Hardy teleporting around the arena. You can't have The Undertaker flying in the air. You can't have these 90-pound Japanese schoolgirls beating up 300-pound wrestlers. That's going to alienate the mainstream audience because you're turning the product into a farce that they can't believe in. But that's exactly where modern day fanboys are taking wrestling. They're turning wrestling from combat sports into surrealist theater. I was at an indie event where the wrestlers had special moves. Like one of the wrestlers had a freeze move where you would go, "Ha!" And then the lights on the ceiling would blink and all the wrestlers would freeze like, "Oh." And then the wrestlers were walking around them like, "Ha ha ha. I have frozen you," right? That's where they're taking wrestling. Surrealist theater. We've gone from Stone Cold versus The Rock to that, right? You should know this is where wrestling fanboys are taking wrestling, and it's scary. In previous videos, I've talked about the incredible shrinking wrestler, about how we used to have these big 6'8" monsters like Hulk Hogan. Then they became more medium-sized like Bret Hart. Then they got smaller than that. And now they're even smaller than that, to where we have guys like Darby Allin and Adam Cole. But here's the thing you should know. They're getting even smaller than that. I am not exaggerating when I say that Alexa Bliss will soon be considered a medium-sized wrestler. Because when you look at some of the up-and-coming wrestlers in the indies, they are smaller than ever. It's like you hear this badass entrance music. Then this tiny little wrestler comes out like, yeah, you know, that's like the norm now. I mean, look, I have nothing against smaller wrestlers. I'm a fan of the cruiserweights. But when you have these 90-pound wrestlers being treated like heavyweights as they engage in these theatrical matches with video game sensibilities, that's just not going to be realistic. And it's going to alienate most mainstream audiences. Look at this. Why is the interviewer standing a foot taller than Becky Lynch? During interviews, the wrestler is supposed to be the centerpiece. Becky Lynch is supposed to be the centerpiece of this interview, yet the interviewer is taking up most of the screen. Why did they present it like this? The interviews are supposed to be about the wrestlers. The wrestlers are supposed to take up most of the screen. The interviewer is supposed to be secondary. Believe it or not, there is an interviewer in this picture. But Hogan and Warrior are so big on the screen that you might not even notice him. Yet, now they're presenting it like this. Becky Lynch is the star. She's supposed to be the biggest one on the screen. Yet here, She looks like a little kid on a field trip or something. They should have never filmed it like this. Becky Lynch should have been presented as the biggest one on the screen, but it's like they don't even care anymore. Let me tell you something you already know. Video games are not reality. Twitter is not reality. Instagram is not reality, where people post up pictures where it's gone through like 15 beauty filters and it doesn't even look like them. But for many wrestling fanboys, that is their reality. They're like online non-stop, deep in the rabbit hole of online drama, Twitter culture, and obsessing over beauty filtered pictures of celebrities that they never even met that doesn't even look like the person. Basically, they live in fakeness, detached from everyday society and sensibilities. It's like they're from another dimension. I saw this in the store recently. Who the heck is the audience for this? Who the heck pays $22 for a figure of Noam Dar? Who the heck is Noam Dar? I mean, would you buy this? Would you pay $22 for this? No? Then who the heck buys this? How niche is today's wrestling audience anyhow? Today's fanboys derive their sensibilities from video games and Twitter, which distances them from the mainstream audience. So when wrestling promotions listen to these fanboys, they are also distancing themselves from the mainstream audience. Look, let me put it this way. If everyone in the wrestling community were like you and me, there would be no weird fanboy culture in wrestling today. Mandy Rose's website would have no subscribers, because why the hell would we ever pay money to see pictures of wrestlers in swimsuits? Why would I ever do that? Why? I would never do that. There's not one person I know that would do that. But that's just the thing. We don't seem to be the target audience for wrestling these days. A while ago, I was at a fan fest, and I see this big smelly neckbeard wearing a Bullet Club shirt, covered in what appears to be animal hair, and he's dragging around a big garbage bag. Like, I'm like, what the hell? As it turns out, the garbage bag is filled with flowers, and he's handing out flowers to the female wrestlers. So I'm standing behind this guy in line, holding my nose. He walks up to Danielle Dashwood, Emma, takes a flower from the garbage bag, and he's like, "This is for you. I love it when you wore that blue swimsuit. Do you still wear it?" And I'm like, what the hell? How dare you do that in front of me? How dare you be creepy in my presence? Like, what the hell, man? He looked like a Twitter person come to life. But here's the thing. I thought that was just a one-off. But years later, I'm at another wrestling event, and there's another fanboy, a completely different fanboy, that's dragging around a bag of flowers. And I'm like, what is this, like a thing? And think about it. They're the ones that the wrestling promotions are listening to, not us. And you wonder why wrestling is the way it currently is. But here's the thing. Sometimes the wrestlers seem to get back at the fanboys, because at that same wrestling event, I saw a female wrestler, and she was talking to two smelly neckbeards, and she was like, you know, it's just so hard for me to talk to people I'm attracted to. I just can't talk to attractive people. But unattractive people? People I have no attraction to whatsoever? That's no problem. I can talk to them freely. And she's like talking to these two neckbeards freely, and they're like looking at each other like, and I'm like, ha ha ha, good. So these fanboys have video game sensibilities and Twitter-like behavior. Another difference is how they use wrestling. I think for most of us, we use wrestling as an escape. After a long day of school, long day of work, we sit down and we use wrestling as a getaway for larger-than-life characters, edgy storylines, all building up to the big fight at the pay-per-view, Shawn Michaels versus Stone Cold. What's going to happen? But many of these fanboys seem to reject using wrestling that way. They reject wrestling as escapism. Instead, they want wrestling to be an outlet to air their personal grievances and activism. They basically want to take the lecturing that they do on Twitter and put it on the wrestling show. And if you dare complain about it in any way, even if you don't disagree with it, you just don't want it on your wrestling show, they will drive you out so fast because they don't want wrestling to be a mainstream getaway. They want it to be their own private exclusionary thing where they air their fanboy grievances. Well, maybe if they take a shower and stop dragging flowers around, they won't have so many freaking grievances. So we have video game sensibilities, Twitter culture, and an exclusionary fan base in wrestling right now. Is it any wonder why wrestling isn't cool anymore? Wrestling promotions should not be pigeonholing themselves into a product that panders only to a niche fan base while forgetting the mainstream fans. Instead of pandering only to fans that would subscribe to see pictures of wrestlers in swimsuits, they should also pander to fans who would not subscribe to see pictures of wrestlers in swimsuits. You know, the rest of us. I would never pay money to see a picture of a random wrestler in a swimsuit. But you know what I would pay money to see? Austin McMahon, Hogan Rock, NWO Sting, Chyna walking out at the Royal Rumble, and the crowd's going nuts. I am a mainstream wrestling fan that wants to see mainstream wrestling fan things, not indie fanboy things. I and millions of other alienated wrestling fans are not a part of this toxic online wrestling community. We, the mainstream wrestling fans, can fill up the rest of those seats in those half-empty arenas that you have right now if you could only give us a product that we can actually get into.